The following is a presentation of the ForceCenter podcast feed.
From the center of the galaxy, this is the ForceCenter podcast feed, and this episode is one of our deep dives. Our deep dive from a tall diving board into a big pool full of relaxing Bacta. Bacta talk. What we're talking about today can be relaxing, but it can also be thrilling, frightening, exciting. We are continuing to examine the magic of lightsaber fights. This episode is part 6. There are a lot of lightsaber fights, and we are breaking them up to even smaller amounts because we want to really go deep and enjoy them. Anyway, I'm Joseph Scrimshaw.
I'm Ken Napzok. Love all this because you're right. This particular episode is actually really comforting because we're diving into the Force Awakens, and I went back to a simpler time, 2015, and it was calming. It was relaxing.
A simpler time that birthed many complex feelings and opinions. Understandably, people want to engage with Star Wars, and this was a big bit of new Star Wars, and it's really fascinating to be getting to enough distance from Force Awakens with the entire sequel trilogy concluded now for several years and have those memories of those more innocent days, but also have the story and the narrative and everything be more complete, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Very right.
All right, we're going to get into this, but we want to let you know that today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. This week, we are recommending Padawan by Kirsten White. It is a new adventure of young Obi-Wan Kenobi. I read the first couple of pages and really enjoyed it, so if you want to dive in, you can download your free audiobook today by going to audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. One more time, that's audibletrial.com/ForceCenter for your free audio book. All right, Ken, are you ready to talk about lightsabers?
I absolutely am. I wish I had one in my hand right now. Oh, wait, I do have my Kylo one within reach. Go ahead, Joseph. I'll be right back.
As Ken strains Kylo-like to reach his lightsaber that I hope bumps into his mic so you can really feel the excitement. I'll catch you all up on what we're doing here. If you're just catching this episode, we've been doing this series where we're discussing lightsaber fights because they are such a key part of Star Wars. On one hand, they are just the absolute cool, the thrill, the fun of a pulpy adventure, serial action adventure, space fantasy movie is all captured by lightsabers and duels with them. But the duels so often tell the story. They reflect the core themes. The lightsabers are symbols of what the characters intend to do, what they stand for, all those great things and all those great different needs and wants get examined in these duels. So we've so far discussed the original trilogy duels, the prequel battles, and now we are on to the sequel showdowns. This episode, we are diving into Kylo Ren versus Finn, Rey, and perhaps Kylo's own feelings of failure. What all is fighting in those woods? We'll talk about it. We are only talking about that fight in this episode. The duels of The Last Jedi are so different and so interesting that we kind of wanted to have those as their own episode. Also, we wanted to contain it, so this episode was, under 72 hours. And if we tackled The Last Jedi battles too, I know us. There's so much to talk about in all three of these fights. We needed to contain ourselves, right, Ken?
Yeah, a little behind the curtain stuff. We might be switching like recording programs, and the free version was like, we only give you 2 hours. I was like, well, that doesn't work for ForceCenter.
We'll have to use the old recording system for certain episodes, but I think this one might sneak under 2 hours since we were just talking about one fight. But we'll see. I have said that before, and then felt massive amounts of hubris. So we will find out. So like I said, we're going to dive into this Force Awakens fight. But before we do, I'm curious, Ken, to just kind of go back in time and imagine, remember, what were your hopes, dreams, expectations of what lightsaber fights would be like in the sequel trilogy big picture, not just Force Awakens, but did you find yourself kind of wondering, like, we're on the precipice of this new era in Star Wars, what will this new trilogy offer us in terms of lightsaber fights?
This is a great question. You really forced me to kind of transport myself back to the beginning, right? Which is, it's hard to put that all back in the box. And I think I'm trying to even go before the trailer to your question, because the Kylo lightsaber teaser thing, which lightsaber controversy aside, was like, ooh, okay, now we kind of have a look at what it might be coming down the pipeline. I think I was expecting bigger, kind of more involved fights closer to the prequel style.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit more of the style. We're going to talk about, the prequel style, original trilogy style, both not just in how they were shot, but how they looked, all those kind of things. So I think I was thinking that. And then, I'll admit, all of them were going to involve Luke Skywalker, right? And that's just kind of where my mind was.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's fascinating. So yeah, when the Force Awakens is announced, you're like, I can't wait to see the big Luke Skywalker lightsaber fight.
This is even before the Ignite the Green campaign that led into episode 8. Yeah, just obviously, we knew new heroes were coming down the pipeline. Yeah. I never doubted that and wanted that, was open to that. But it just, made a lot of sense to me. Luke would be there and Luke would have a saber out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think I always wondered about the lightsaber. I think I kind of hoped, but I think I wanted him to use it in a specific way. Anyway, this is a preview for our The Last Jedi conversation, because you know what? Luke doesn't show up with a lightsaber in The Force Awakens, except for staring at one with a mix of emotions at the end of the film. I was so consumed with Lightsaber Thoughts from 2012, from the announcement on. I think because I've always, of course, loved lightsabers like so many Star Wars fans. But even in the prequel era, when the films were still coming out and I had more mixed feelings about them, but I still thought about Star Wars a lot, bought a lot of Star Wars things, and friends who'd gotten really, really grumpy about Star Wars and kind of pushed me on, like, why are you still watching these movies? Everybody knows they're bad, I would always just say, like, they have lightsabers. So for me, like, lightsabers and lightsaber battles were like, even if there's lots of other things in Star Wars I'm not sure about, I always enjoy this. I always enjoy the fantasy and the symbolism of lightsabers. So I think I was kind of focused on what's the new version of it going to be. And by that point, there'd been, so much kind of discussion and analysis of the differences between the original trilogy and the prequel. That original trilogy style of the more big, powerful swings and a weight to the blades and all that. And then in contrast for the prequels, the speed, the finesse, the kind of invention, and this whole idea that Lucas talked about in many an interview of, well, yeah, these are Jedi at the height of their powers. So I think when I thought about that, of like, well, who's going to be the new Nick Gillard? What's the new style going to be? Because it felt like, okay, if the original trilogy laid down the groundwork, then the prequels reinvented it. What's going to be next? And that got me thinking about I wonder what kind of era this is going to be. What kind of training are these characters going to have? What's going to make sense? What's going to be original and new? And I didn't get to kind of complete that thought. That was just the sort of, I wonder. But I feel like that is where it ended up for me, is what's new about the fights in the sequel trilogy is that they're, I think, style-wise, are kind of a mix of the speed and the finesse of the prequel with a little bit more of the original trilogy, big, powerful swings. But I feel like what defines the sequel trilogy is all of the choreography is so character-based, of the characters' level of training, their attitude, their experience with other weapons. It's so character-based, and not like the others haven't been, but I felt like that's the main thing that leads the sequel trilogy choreography.
I absolutely think you're right. This is wonderful stuff, as always, for me here. But it just got me thinking about even where my head was at the time. As discussed on the episodes in which we looked at the prequels, I was one of those, like, I don't know, a lot of hopping and skipping and jumping around. I don't know if I like the prequel fights as much as I did. That's me in 99 to 2010 range. I don't know. But then, the action pulls me in. So I think I had 2014, 2013 range when we're looking at this. That was still kind of in my head. Well, I hope they have a little bit more of the original trilogy style. And I think they do kind of settle down into a nice, right in the center, wonderful mix of everything that's going on. And there are, you're right. I want to make clear, all the other films have character moments in those fights, but this is just a really clear use of it. And I think I enjoy that. Yeah. And anyways, I'm just kind of following up on what you're saying here. You're getting me thinking of my 2014 self. And these fights, particularly Force Awakens, might have been what started my journey to looking at the prequels different, the fights in the prequels.
Yeah, no, and yeah, all of the styles, obviously, all the great choreographers they're very character based. Going through it and talking about it, I kind of feel like the original trilogy style is just kind of Vader's style.
You're really right
Luke is
about
learning to fight to kind of counter Vader, and in his dark
Mhm.
moments, fight more Vader like. We get a little bit of Obi-Wan. And I think the world that we meet in the sequel trilogy era, where the Jedi have been decimated. Kylo is both a Darksider who is emulating his grandfather, but has training from Luke. It kind of makes sense that the most experienced fighter would have a style that is his own, but is also kind of a combination of everything we've seen before, and that the other primary lightsaber user, Rey, would be based not only on her staff, but on her burgeoning, experience of what the Force is. So it's so character driven.
It is. I love, and you had said this before in the original trilogy discussions, but yeah, I love pointing at Vader and go, this is all you in the original trilogy. It's all your style. share, Vader.
Yeah, you should have taken a second investment and say, well, how would you like to fight?
How do you want to do this, Luke? Yep.
What style would you like to use? And Luke's like, I don't know the names. Anyway, let's get into this great battle. Kylo versus Finn and Rey. Diving into this rumble of fate, Kylo appears in the dark woods at about 1 hour and 50 minutes into the film, and then the battle between Finn and Kylo lasts until about 1 hour and 53 minutes. Not a long battle for Finn. Then Rey claims the hero's blade. Seconds later, the chasm opens between the fighters at about 1 hour and 58 minutes, and we only cut away once during the entire fight to Poe blowing up the old thermal oscillator. That's a longer scene, so there's a bigger break, but unlike some of the other fights, we don't cut back and forth to lots of different scenes, lots of different narratives. We're pretty focused. It's really only divided into those two or three big scenes.
Yeah. I love the cutaway to Poe. It's one of my favorite little moments in that dogfight too. So this whole sequence is a lot of fun.
Yeah, and at some point, this is not related to the fight, but at some point, I do need to hear like an oldie-timey kind of Western folk song called "There's a Brand New Hole in That Oscillator." It's a line of dialogue I've come to really appreciate. All right, so what are your current feelings on this lightsaber fight, and have they changed over the years since 2015?
I don't know if they've changed. I've always been a fan of it. I'll tell you, watching this morning, it just seems so innocent. Made that reference up top, but yeah, you just got to go back to this, and it's a different time, and Star Wars fandom, and the world in general. But this fight seems just like a little rumble in the woods. How cute! And I don't mean that from like an outsider, just in the story. It's like, oh, you all don't know what's going to happen. It's going to get a lot worse and it could get bigger. You're just going to have this little fight. But all that aside, I loved it then. I really love it now. It is just one of my favorite fights visually. And that includes like going back to the trailer moment with Kylo that we don't actually really see in the movie. Just intrigued by, we Star Wars fans love our sand planets, our forest planets, our snow planets. So to be like snow and forest planet, it was like just kind of that drew me in. And they use it so well. We'll discuss that later, of course. But yeah, just always love this fight. And now, like you had said up top, Joseph, that with the whole story kind of complete, you just really go back to this one, and it's done with great purpose. And it is a poignant fight, and you learn a lot, and you see a lot, and it's a great starting point for the series that's to come off after this.
Oh, these are some great fights. I love thinking of these dark woods of Starkiller Base / Ilum, as we now know for sure. To imagine this dark forest is Endor and Hoth meet cute.
It's like in a science lab. They're like, okay, what backgrounds do we need from Star Wars? Snow and forest.
Yeah. And I love that there is that famous trailer moment of the ignition, the revelation of the crossguard. Jittering blade of Kylo, but it's a kind of a different shot in the actual movie, which I think is more effective in the movie because at that point it feels like we're aware of it.
Yeah.
We don't need to be introduced to it again in this shot, and it's more powerful that it's just jittering away there. I love the environment. We'll talk more about that. So I love the look of it. I love how it's just dark enough for those blades to really, really glow, for the blue of the Skywalker blade to really, really pop. So it looks great. I appreciated this fight a ton. I always liked it. But I think in some ways I enjoyed even more now that it is beats in a story that you can kind of map the whole story, the whole relationship for all the fighters involved in kind of the fate of the galaxy, the fate of the Force. A couple other things that I have really, really love about it is I don't think I thought about it a ton at the time, even though we discussed the narrative beats. I think looking at all of these lightsaber fights, I think this is one of the most narrative fights in all of Star Wars. Like the actual beats of the fight tell the story, right? Like we're seeing where Luke is at in Bespin, right? We know where Vader is at. Vader's testing him, revelations, all that. But it's the fight's done when the big moment happens, right? When Vader reveals the father truth. The fight is done when Luke looks at his hand in Return of the Jedi and makes a different decision, right? The fight is done when Obi-Wan agrees to make that promise to a dying Qui-Gon. I think Rey catching the blade, Rey letting the Force in. There's so many moments of just pure. That is the story. It's almost like you're watching a musical, and in musicals are always, in theory, the songs are the explosion where the biggest emotion is expressed, where the thing that can't be expressed any other way pops out. But there are songs where just like, that this character is totally brokenhearted and it can only come out in song. And then there's the kind of songs where, like, if you took that song out of the musical, part of the plot would be gone and you wouldn't know what happened, right? If you took the actual fight out, like if you took the fight out of Bespin and still got the father revelation, you'd still know what happened. And this is so narrative. It's so essential to the narrative within the fight itself.
Yeah, really important. I just saw Moulin Rouge of the Pantages. So what you're saying is Rey getting the saber is like when the two characters sang Gaga's Bad Romance. Is that because that was a key point in Moulin Rouge in the play? One of my favorites. And I was. You always say such great things, and it just gets me thinking of my own journey, and I love kind of sharing them, even if they're sometimes I stumble through my past. 2015, again, going to a different era, but it's also a different era of punditry and how you look at things, and particularly my own career and how I broke down fights or how I engaged with things and changed my views on that and how to do it. Definitely since then. But like, there's a lot of moments in this fight that I took out on the surface, maybe took for some of the bigger beats for granted. Totally fine. And I just remember slowing down. It was one of the first times I even kind of slowed myself down to look, all right, what is this moment actually mean? Because I had a couple friends who weren't happy about Rey going, oh, that's right, the Force. You just reminded me of the Force. And they weren't connecting it to what Maz had said earlier. And they weren't. And I remember really just going, this fight's communicated something to me. The other fights did too. We know this. We've spent a lot of podcast episodes talking about it. But in 2015, it just was, I saw it a different way. And then this is one of the fights I started to engage with Star Wars a little differently. And then ForceCenter really kicks off in 2016 after we started in 2015. And we start looking at so many deeper things and all those wonderful themes and all that stuff. So, I just want to echo what you're saying. I really think this is a fight with great purpose.
Yeah. And I want to be very clear. I'm not criticizing any other fights or saying that the characters' emotions or the storytelling that happens in their fights is not essential. I just think like it's really affecting because there are such huge moments for the characters within this fight. I think it's one of the biggest cheer moments in Star Wars. I think I saw The Force Awakens in the theater 5 times. And again, a more innocent, positive time. But mass eruption of cheers 5 times in my personal experience for Rey catching that blade. Obviously we'll talk more about the moment, but like that's it. It's still affecting to me. It's still thrilling. And I was rewatching it for this episode. I was really reminded again about just how kind of frightening and visceral and raw the entire fight is, right? There is a lot of actual real physical pain. Like there's a lot of invention in how to injure people with lightsabers without killing them or actually removing limbs. So there's a lot of just physical pain. There's blood in the snow, and all of the characters are so raw and open emotionally, right? This isn't any trained Jedi and Sith kind of going through the motions, right? Everyone is like, how's this going to work out? Everybody's feelings are wide open and falling in the snow.
Yeah. Going back to this balance of prequel and original trilogy, of also just the era too. I think you're really right there. And how many times do I quote this? I'm going to stop quoting this, but Adam Driver's, I like to control the physicality of this character. It really, you see it here, right? Everything that he does, the hammering of the injury, the stomp and the steps, all those things, but even the angry, almost desperate hacks, all that stuff, you just feel it. It is really raw and real. And I think, again, that's why I love this fight so much. I always did. And you're right. There were cheers every time, both when Rey getting the blade and Rey downing Kylo was a big cheer moment in some of the screenings I was in. So yeah, it still stands up in that regard. And I love it. This is a post Lord of the Rings era. This is a post Game of Thrones era where, Brienne and the Hound are biting each other's ears off and punching each other in the crotch. And like Star Wars here comes along. It's like, it needs to strike a little bit of a different chord, and no one's ear is going to get bit off, at least in this fight. But a lot of things that you talk about, it scratches all those itches in a wonderful way.
Yeah, and not to focus on just Rey for the narrative, you're reminding me that, with Adam Driver's phenomenal performance, the film raises this question of Kylo has this misguided idea that if he crosses the most verboten line of killing someone extremely close to him, that will end his pain, end his being pulled between the light and the dark side, and the pain will finally be gone. So it raises this question. I think most of the audience kind of has an instinctual answer of, is that going to work? And the answer is no. But the film does raise the question of, is Kylo going to believe that, great, now I'm settled? In this film, the fight answers that question with a resounding no. Didn't seem to work out for you.
Nope. Go back to the drawing board.
Yeah. Final two kind of big picture thoughts. I think it did have a great mix of original and prequel kind of choreography, but with Kylo's jittering kind of broken blade and the actual crossguard saber, it also just made the thrill part, the fight part, feel fresh and inventive to me as well.
Yeah, no, I like that too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Final thing about looking at it in the past is, talked about this before, of when well, I'll just say it this way. I love that Rey's Palpatine poke pays off.
Yeah. I put that down to talk later. Yes, and I like the way you phrase that. Yeah,
we'll talk about it in more detail. But anybody just catching up, like, we talked about that. I'm sure a bunch of people joked and talked about that. There's a great excerpt that Star Wars Minute podcast pulled out when Jennifer and I were guests on Star Wars Minute talking about joking about, like, see, I think she is a Palpatine. So we'll talk about that in more detail, but that's really fun to see with the benefit of the sequel trilogy being completed. Let's get into motivations, Ken. Let's talk about what is at stake for the characters, why they're fighting, what victory is for them. Let's start with Finn, because obviously this goes into the big Rey and Kylo fight, but it starts with Finn, and I want to make sure that we give Finn his due. So for you, what's the stake for Finn? Why is he fighting?
This is a great starting point, because there's some angle with Finn and Rey of avenging Han, but that's not 100% correct, because they're trying to get out of there. They're trying to. Things are happening. They need to get to the Falcon. It's old Kylo who's like, we're not done yet. So as a Han guy, I want to give some people in the fight credit for maybe avenging him, which is maybe not the right spirit. But from that, I go to this idea of Finn just really fighting for what is so key to him in this entire series, this connection, this kind of sense of community that really emerges later on for him. But this is the first connection he's made in his life, right? And he begins the movie full of these feelings that are pushing him away from the world he's kind of trapped in, and the world he kind of was brought up in against his will. And as we know, he runs away a few times. I think with some good intentions deep down in his heart, but he can't connect to those. And it's this connection to Rey. And after him running away for the benefit of himself, he picks up that blade for her, right? And that's the start of his journey. His journey doesn't end there. There's 2 more full movies in which that journey changes and causes him to grow, and that connection becomes to the community. But here in this moment, it's truly him fighting for this victory condition. For me, as I see it, it's the safety of those, or in this case, the one person he cares about. He's fighting on a feeling that had driven him this direction, but he just couldn't connect with it. He isn't sure what was going on. We go back to the village where, I think he's like affected by what's going on, but the instinct is to run away from it. And he's not going to run away. And he has that moment. He's his back turned to Kylo. I love it when he fishes out that blade in the snow, kind of shakes it off, and then gets up to turn around. And I just love that. I love that starting point for Finn.
Yeah, no, I so agree. I think for both Finn and Rey, we'll focus on Finn, but I think for both Finn and Rey, this fight is like seeing their true spirit. And we go to Last Jedi and they kind of have stumbles, right, to get to where they need to be big picture. But this is the kind of moment where we see as the audience, like, this is where they're going. This is who they can be at their best, and where they end up in Rise of Skywalker. And I think it is, for Finn, my one-word big picture of what is this fight about for him is defense. I think that Finn has redefined himself in this film. He knows that he doesn't want to fight for the First Order. He tells Rey that clearly. He tells the audience that clearly. And I think there's that practical of like, oh, I realize that I've been taken as a child and told to do a thing that doesn't feel right. I don't want to just kill for them. But I think like the deeper personal thing is, it's a practical thing to say, I don't want to work for this organization. But on a personal level, I think there's I have allowed this organization to control and dominate me. My entire life, I've been frightened of Phasma and Kylo. And, Kylo is the big bad that I could never stand up to, never say no to. So I think I think this fight is kind of for his own soul up to a point, that he's fighting for his own freedom, his own choice, and his backing up those strong words that he tells Rey at Maz's castle of, I made this choice that I would not kill for them. And he's like standing up. And unlike Maz told him that he was somebody who runs, he turns around, right? And it's basically like, Kylo is a symbol of that I have been allowed this organization to control and dominate me down to my soul, and I'm turning around and saying no. So I think there's that personal level, but then I totally agree with you. I think there's the more direct level of Finn has decided that he is not with the First Order. He won't do what he says. He doesn't want to get involved in the war, but he has gotten such strength from this bond with Rey, and he has redefined himself as, well, if I don't fight for the First Order, what do I fight for? Well, I at least fight for this friend, for Rey. It's why he came to Starkiller Base, right? And I think it's so significant that it's not just a plot mechanic to have a 2-part fight that Kylo does the big force push to Rey, right? It's seeing the threat that Rey is under is what motivates him, I think, to stand up in this spirit of defense, right? Because I think it's so powerful that it isn't like it isn't Finn running after him to avenge Han Solo or to avenge his own soul, right? It's this organization, as represented by Kylo, just won't let me be, so I'm going to turn around and defend myself. It's everything about it is defense, which I think is great because it kind of leads towards where Finn is going in The Rise of Skywalker, this true sort of Jedi figure of defense.
Yeah, no, I love this. And even, as far as breaking from his past or breaking what he was, the First Order stuff about it, go back to the Two and All Village, right? Where he's having these moments, he's not firing. And who's the one who's like, wait a minute, what? And Kylo has that stare down moment with him. And, gets the advantage there. Finn certainly cowers. Why wouldn't you? You just saw some of the stuff he's done and his reputation. You've been around it. So from that to this moment, I think you're right. It is his true break from it. And the Rey connection stuff, I remember getting kind of this debate about the Finn arc and all that kind of stuff. It's like he does not pick up that blade to join the Resistance. It's not unlike Han, kind of skirting around the rebellion until Return of the Jedi, when it's like, yeah, I'm a general, I'll fight in this now. It's he finally connects there at that moment. And the Rey of it all is important because along with Poe, let's give Poe and BB-8 some credit too of connecting with Finn. But that is why he's there. That is why he's just, I will figure out how the Force is. I got to go get my friend. And that's a powerful connection. It's a starting point for what's to come. Like you said, where he ends up in Rise of Skywalker. He doesn't get to that moment, leading the charge, connecting, being the center, like you and I had talked, and you brought up some wonderful facts when we discussed Finn's arc in the films, or in a podcast episode a couple years ago now. And it all starts with this moment. I think that picking up the blade is an intersection of all those things we're talking about. I love it.
Yeah, and I do just love Finn's arc, because I think that there is a thing that can sometimes be true in reality, where is people, we often have an easier time having empathy for people we directly interact with. But we can struggle to make that empathy into a larger conceptual thing, to have empathy for entire groups of people who we don't know one-on-one, and there's too many to know one-on-one.
Yeah.
So you have to have this little bit of a conceptual, like, I have empathy for the idea of people as well as this individual. And I love Finn's journey, that it starts with such empathy for Rey and expands to just this beacon of empathy that he is in Rise of Skywalker for everyone and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want to go down the negative path. And yes, I know he says Rey a lot in this series, but it's important. It's important. And that connection leads to so many wonderful things for him.
They're the first people that looked at one another as though they were people. It's so powerful. Speaking of powerful, let's talk Rey. For you, what is at stake in this battle for Rey? Why is she fighting? What is victory for her? What are your thoughts on Rey?
The big place I go to is fighting to discover her place in the story, which is so much of her journey in this first movie, right? Before she climbs those steps, it's all this legend and about who she is. And, Han is gone. This Luke guy at this point, is he even real? I don't even know. Finn is even down. And Kylo has that line, right, of it's just us now. Han Solo can't save you. And that's so much of what her journey is. I thought Luke Skywalker was a myth. I want someone else to take this blade. And it's something that's still going to be at play. And her starting point, I believe, is this is a character who is such, just full of empathy. We start with the BB-8 and Tenafix, right? And in this particular case, it is her connection and her empathy for Finn, who is injured, and it drives her into the fight too. She gets force pushed away. You're right. She puts that blaster up there, but I think that moment is a little bit of unfocused fear, anger, the Han stuff, and what drives her forward is that. And look, once she's there, once that empathy drives her into the fight, I don't think she immediately, like you point out, there's some beats along the way. She's overwhelmed. She's definitely scared. She's running on raw talent and energy, which, by the way, is much like at the Resistance at this time of the fight. Like, literally, you see cut back to Poe, kind of, I don't know what we're gonna do. What are we gonna do? Oh wait, we have an opening. We're just kind of there. And then we know, we'll go into the deeper stuff there, of course. But when she calms down, does what Maz says, and all those kind of things, she truly finds herself, right? That's what those moments are. Even when the blade comes to her, she Flash calls it. That moment. A lot of us can get our purposes kind of shown, right, revealed, and you still got to take the step forward. You still got to find yourself in that, and that's what I think what the end of it does. She finds what's always been there, what we all have inside of us, a purpose, an identity, and a place in the story, long journey ahead. So to me, the victory, whether or not she knows she's fighting for that, is the discovery of Rey. That's what's at stake for her here.
Yeah, the discovery of kind of standing on her own 2 feet. Like, obviously, she is, she fights with her staff. She has lives on Jakku in a harsh environment, and there's this part of her that I think is like, yeah, no, absolutely, I fight. I'll stare down Unkar Plot, and I'll beat up his thugs, and I'll run after somebody who I think is, I'll knock Tito off his lug of beast. I don't care. She is a fighter for sure. But I also think there's part of her that is consumed with fear that's a much more emotional fear than a physical fear, right? The fear that her parents aren't actually ever coming back, and that need for connection from a parental figure. I think you're so right to point out that that's Kylo's first attack, right? That Han Solo, this new father figure you found, can't can't look out for you. It's just you alone, Rey. And I think that is cutting to her fear. So I love what you say about like the victory condition being finding her identity. But I kind of think that what she's fighting and how she ends up with that victory is by facing her fear. I think in some ways what she's fighting in this fight is her own fear. And just out of fear, she takes a pot shot at Kylo. She doesn't even get a shot off, right? And
no.
Right. And this, you can't do it. He pushes her away right away. And she, I think both her and Finn are running. They're not trying to confront this. She doesn't want to be a part of this narrative. She's run away from the blade. She doesn't want this. Everything we've been seeing her doing on Starkiller Base is what she's great at, which is just pure survival, right?
Yes.
And I think once Finn is horrifically injured, she sees that their connection of empathy. I think that is, she has multiple awakenings. I think that's a real awakening, right? Of like, why did she ask for the blade? Why did she accept the blade in that moment? And to me, because she doesn't want to. I think she's afraid to find her place in the story. She's afraid to look for her place in the story because what if she doesn't have one? What if her parents are never coming back? What if she is just a scavenger and should always be alone, right? And I think it's that fear that she pushes past to say, like, I am afraid of what's behind the door that's labeled accept lightsaber.
Yeah.
But I am going to face that fear instead of just running from it, And I think at this point in their relationship, they've had this connection and they've seen into each other's mind, and she's seen some of Kylo's weaknesses. But I think Kylo, to her at this point, he is just a symbol of fear. He is just like literally a dark monster stalking her in the woods. Like, I'm not a threat to you. I'm trying to run away from you and you won't let me go. Like, it's just this fearful monster just chasing you down and literally yelling, face me, you coward, face me. Right. Yeah. And I think her victory, her first victory of accepting the lightsaber is just saying like, okay, I will face you. I will face this fear that you represent. And then taking, this next step of victory to not just accepting the blade, not just accepting that she has no choice but to fight if she wants to defend Finn and defend herself, but accepting this connection to something larger than herself in the Force is, I think another moment of facing the fear, and I think so many people, so many of us face those kinds of fears anytime we try to do something big or different, right?
Yeah.
Or sometimes, if you're a creative type, I think it's that kind of fear. We're just like, I want to write something. I have all these ideas, but that blank page is real scary. That's the lightsaber flying at me.
Yeah.
And do I catch it or not? Because if I catch it, there's the possibility of even greater failure, right? And I think it's that kind of fear that she's facing.
I really love that you're connecting to that. You and I have, certain experiences that are going to make us think of that kind of creative pursuit. But I think it's anything in life. For me, it's, I've had this long, weird relationship with stand-up that I've loved and hated. And sometimes that microphone has flown into my hand and it's like, great, yeah, I'd love to do this. Oh, man, I don't know what that means. And I don't know who I am with that microphone. And I have to discover it. And I have to open and close my mind and just hear my own voice. And I think that's part of it. I also loved, if I made this idea, you're talking about Rey, the survivor. She's truly the survivor, has this great strength because of that. But you're so right. Of just, there's so much of this film is about, well, my parents, they're going to come back, right? Right. No, I got to face that. Oh, great. Han, even Chewie, like, oh, I got all these folks are, hey, Finn. It's like just a simple concept of, this is your chance and your time to stand up. And like we keep saying, obviously more journey to come, more self-discovery, more challenges, more obstacles. You're going to need to learn a lot about yourself more, but this is the big starting point. And I think, these 3 or 4 beats in the fight are the key steps in Rey's journey forward.
Yeah. And it's like she accepts the blade in the fear and facing it in that moment, to help defend Finn if he's even alive, to save her own life, to push past against that fear. And pretty much as soon as she's done with that, it's like, great, now I'm going to spend the next chunk of time trying to give this blade away. So it is this sort of like, to me, this peak of like, no, you have a place in the story. That lightsaber is telling you have a place in the story. That lightsaber wants you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fate wants you, and you need to work through, your fear and get back to this moment that she's in here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a great point. Oh, I love that point of the rest. There's some reminders, the rest of the story. Like, hey, remember what you did when you stood tall? You could do that. You got to discover that. And that was the first part. Let's complete it.
Yep. Exactly. So let's talk Kylo. For you, why is Kylo fighting? We can go emotional, we can go practical. I think there's a lot going on with old Kylo. Where does your mind go?
This is where mine, because this overall, this fight is self-discovery and identity, right? This is kind of what we're talking about here. And this fight makes sense for this film. I just put down that Kylo is fighting to confirm that he is the big baddie that he wants to be, that he is what everyone thinks he is. I am Kylo Ren. I'm not Ben Solo, who just killed my dad. I am Kylo Ren. That is what he's here for. I'm going to prove to the world that I am the monster that I wish I am, but probably in my heart, not so sure about that.
Yeah. Oh, man, I so agree about the big picture. I think it is all about proving his power to himself while fighting on easy mode, which we can talk about more.
Yeah. Because again, I love this. He stops them. I always say he's also like he's confronting witnesses to his weakness. Like you saw that. You saw that. You saw me do that. I got to kill you and take you out for that. You witnessed my weakness.
Yeah, I think that he has been wrestling with weakness this entire film, right? He's chasing the dark side because he's believed the lie that is the way to fully be himself and to fully own his own destiny, and that other people have tried to control him. He's not open to the idea that Snoke is doing the exact same. He's not open to the idea that he's just transferred his fear of failing Luke, Han, Leia over to failing his grandfather Vader. He's not dealing with any of that. It's just fear that he's not going to be good enough, right? In this movie, Snoke has doubted him and challenged him. Go, even you, Master of the Knights of Ren, I don't know if you can do this. We shall see. Hux has mocked him, right? He's doubted his own commitment to the dark side out loud in front of the Vader mask. So we know that he is doubting his power. And what I love about this is he does not chase them for any great strategic purpose, right? He's not really trying to get anything from them. It's not like he's still after BB-8, right? He's just trying to prove himself, trying to quiet his doubts by killing his father only left him more confused and feral. So he's going to quiet them in this other way.
Yeah. This is one of my weird obtuse references, but in the movie version of About a Boy, when Hugh Grant and Rachel Weisz are just starting to date, and they Marcus and her son meet, and then he's being a real prick, and finally the kid screams, "My mom doesn't love him. He loves me. She loves me." He just kind of loses it. Like, no, she loves me. I just go to that scene and Kylo just going, "No, I am a badass. Doesn't everyone? I am the badass here." He's punching himself and he's bleeding and he's unbalanced and he's yelling and he's like, "No, I'm the badass."
That is really, really great. Here's my weird personal life reference that I was thinking about in this fight. We'll talk more about kind of the actual fight dynamics, the fight levels. But watching this fight again, I feel like this entire fight, Kylo is just he's fighting on easy mode, right? He kind of doesn't take Finn seriously, and then when he wants to be done with Finn, he's done with Finn. Even when Rey stands up to him, he's just chasing her. He's not going for any kill shots. He's just battering her down. He's not taking this fight particularly seriously, and except for the moments where he suddenly has to. And it reminded me there were times in my life when I worked at Kinko's in downtown Minneapolis, and it was incredibly stressful because it was very busy with a mix of high-powered, extremely wealthy clients who expected exactly what they wanted when they wanted it, and frankly, a lot of people who are really struggling in life. So almost everybody who is in a Kinko's was upset that they had to be in a Kinko's. And
Can you make that the business motto? Kinko's. We know you don't want to be here.
it really is Kinko's. Nothing you want here is the actual thing you want. The only things you are making here are things to try to get you something you actually want. This is a space you have to be on a journey to a place you actually want to be. Plus, Kinko's has been constructed. It's not the same, I don't think, at FedEx offices, but I don't know these days. But it was basically be like, hey, what if you had a restaurant where all of the diners could see directly into the kitchen and yell at the chefs to make theirs first? That is the way Kinko's was built. So anyway, point was, it was extremely stressful. And some days I just come home and just feel like so rattled and just like need to feel in control of something, right?
Yeah.
And I would play the video game Perfect Dark, which had like settings where you could create a bunch of sims. And I think in one of them, I believe, was called Meat Sims, because they were just the dumbest AI opponents possible. And I can't remember what the max was, maybe something like 16. I would set a map with like 16 regenerating meat sims, and I would just run around and crush them in Perfect Dark. Because then maybe it was immature, maybe it was wisely cathartic, I don't know, but it restored balance and made me feel like I had control over myself and my life again. And watching this fight again, it feels like I think Kylo's treating them like meat sims. Of like, I want to prove myself, but I can't deal with anything challenging. And I think both of these weaklings will fall easily before my heritage, my training, my might.
I love that. I love everything you're saying here, especially the video game stuff. But yeah, when he looks up, it's like, all right, so you got these witnesses to his weakness. I'm going to go get them. And I think even in the beginning, he's like, nope, stop. And he's like, kind of, some of the blade moves. It's like, yeah. This is going to be great. This is going to be great. I can't wait to just kill you and kick your asses. Oh, this is the best.
Yep. And I think on top of it, it's like, I mean, I think he would have just, after what happened with his father, he would have just, chewed through anybody to feel powerful. But both of these characters have contributed to him feeling weak, right?
Yeah.
Finn, in theory, is a weak, pathetic, nobody traitor who broke his programming and made a fool out of Kylo, right? By escaping. Rey is an unimportant scavenger girl. There's a lot in Force Awakens about the kind of sickness of class attitudes and labels, right? Rey is an unimportant scavenger girl, but she saw inside Kylo's mind and exposed his fear of not living up to the legend, right? So I think he sees them both as like easy targets to prove his power on this instinctual emotional level, and also like, hey, if I can squash anyone who's ever made me feel weak, that'd be great. I will squash these two bugs who made me feel weak. How did they do that? They're bugs. There's no reason they should have made me feel weak. Yeah,
which you and I have talked a lot. It's a lot of people's favorite moment there, or that dual interrogation scene with Rey and Kylo. I always go, it's like Kylo's first defeat. I'll take my helmet off. Look at my beautiful hair. I'm Kylo Ren. Oh, damn it. How did you know that? And he's on balance. He's on shaky ground the rest of the film. I love it. And yeah, and then the Finn, that's a great point about Finn, of just like, this dumb FN 2187 just made me look like a fool in front of my bosses.
Yeah, a number made me, Kylo Ren, Masters of the Knight of Ren, look dumb. That's Yeah, and then I think the injuries pile up for Kylo, and then to add, he doesn't get what he wants from killing his father. They aren't as easy as he expects to just waltz through while he's grievously injured. But then on top of all that, they are trying to beat him with the symbol of his legacy.
Yes.
And that the fact that we start with that lightsaber belongs to me, that's such a great picture of entitlement, that like that lightsaber is a symbol of everything I would like to reject, and also give it to me because it's mine.
Yeah. I love that, because Kylo is just, he's angry, he's pounding his injury, which was still one of my favorite little details. Yeah. And even sometimes you and I can talk about it deeply here, and I want to hear your thoughts on it. I still don't know why I love it as much as I do. From the moment he did it, I was like, that's a wonderful choice. It's a wonderful thing. And the detail, the blood falling on the ground, and Chewie's bowcaster kind of setting that up. I just love all that stuff. But he's mad at himself. He's mad at his weakness. He's mad that deep down he knows he didn't solve anything. And these, I wrote down in my notes that these dummies are trying to stand up to Kylo bleeping Ren, trying to honor Han Solo, not on my watch. And so this idea of victory for Kylo Ren is like the complete annihilation of Ben Solo. And he wants that saber to prove it, right? It's so much about that saber. That line is such a little kid line. That saber's mine, man. It's mine. I deserve it. It's my family name, my family blade. How dare the Force send it to someone else?
Yeah. Yeah. And it really is this, mixture of like, I reject that lineage, and I pick this superior lineage. And I don't need to be defined by parental figures, but father figures, but also I deserve that, So it's like this weird twisted pride in being a Skywalker.
Well, especially you factor in the Lor San Tekka stuff at the beginning. If Lor San Tekka's like, you'll never escape your name, and he's, I'll kill you. How dare you say that? But I do want that blade.
I'm sure he'd be in like, if somebody like posted this on Reddit, Kylo would be like, I only wanted it because it was Anakin's prototype blade before he made his cool Vader blade. So yeah, I think we're real aligned on Kylo. It is so much about proving his power, but there is a switch toward the end, and I do want to ask you if you feel like Kylo is in the fight initially to truly prove his power, and there are stumbling blocks on the way because he is not at his best. What do you make of the "you need a teacher" moment? I can show you the ways of the Force that he says to Rey.
I love that you pointed that out because it's a little bit of a gear shift. I think it's still in the same ballpark. It's about who if he senses what's going on, right? He's attuned to the Force enough, even through his anger and his imbalanced state. Like he sees what's going on. He feels probably what's going on, both maybe the confusion in her and the power, right? He sensed it from the beginning. That's why he keeps telling his boss, "No, I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you. Yeah, she's a dumb scavenger. Trust me. She's dumb. She's nothing. But you should be afraid of her because look what she did." And so I wonder, my thought back to you, Joseph, is the idea of him going, but you know what? I'm such a badass Kylo Ren that I bet I could mold her. I bet I could control her and grow her power. And then that would be to my advantage. Whether he's thinking about rule of two and Sith ways and Snoke. I don't know. Maybe it's in the back of his head. But I just think it's part of that. If I'm truly Kylo Ren, what I'm sensing in her, Kylo Ren can fix, and she needs me. And I know that's her weakness. She's right. She's starting to win because I've told her you have no place in this story. That Han Solo's not saving you. And I'm starting to feel something switch here. So let me just put that knife in the wound a little bit more. No. I know what you're feeling, but I'm gonna get you there. You need me, and it's the start of that kind of give and take and that horrible push-pull in their relationship.
Yeah, no, I really love that. I think it really does set up. They don't have that level of intimacy yet that they developed in The Last Jedi, but they've felt the beginning of it through that connection. As he tells Snoke, he knows that she's powerful, right? And I think he's just kind of just playing with her, battering her defenses, like we've seen, Vader do, so he can, have the conversation that he wants. But I think, on a practical level, I don't know that it's the first thing on his mind of like, I am going to follow the old traditional rule of two. I will turn her into my dark apprentice, and then we'll destroy Snoke. I think he's fine with all that, but I think it's a much more emotional moment where it is, to me, about fear and entitlement and power. Of his first reaction is, "You are nothing. You're a scavenger girl." Okay, well, you got my mind.
Yep.
And now you continue to fight me. The blade came to you, so like the evidence is piling up of like, well, I can't just write you off as not having power.
Yeah.
The next way I will try to be in control is tell you can only have power if I'm your teacher. It's like this weird sort of like force gatekeeping of like, I don't want my other friend to be a fan of Star Wars, but they seem to be becoming a fan of Star Wars. I will make that okay by saying, okay, I'll tell you what episodes to watch and in what order. I'll be in control of your fandom.
Yeah, there's some bigger stuff at play too. Things we've talked about, and just in terms of the Empire and the powers in the galaxy who say, "Don't worry, you don't have to worry about those rebels. Don't worry about them at all. Oh, but you should fear them and give all of your give all of yourself to me. I'll keep you safe." It's definitely in line with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think on a practical level, I'm sure he's fine with destroying old Snoke.
Yeah, and you're so right. I want to highlight again. Like, I don't think he's like, oh gosh, I read the rule of two thing. Luke and I had that conversation. Yeah, but it's just that instinctual kind of like, all right, I'm Kylo Ren. I can make this work, and you need me.
Yeah, great stuff. So let's talk about the environment here before we take a break. For this lightsaber fight, how does the environment help tell the story or contribute to just the thrills of the battle?
Yeah, it's as we said up top, but at the time, just a little peak of snow and trees was something really unique and different to me, and maybe other people like, I don't know, it didn't do much for me. I just always loved it. Always loved it. Again, visually, one of my favorites and everything about it. And I love the making of, and we'll talk about some of the realities of the filmmaking going into this fight. But you had kind of said something about this up top, made me think of it, just this little bit of the, I don't know, three kids lost in the woods vibe. It's a fairy tale. Do you have enough breadcrumbs to lead you back out? Can you discover yourself there and get through this real kind of, fairy tale vibe? And then you add in the crumbling planet, just added a wonderful kind of sci-fi / fantasy element of danger, an exploding world, right? Made me even think of Star Trek at the time. And I just like the use of that there. It all just kind of adds up. It's just a wonderful bunch of little ingredients that take this tiny fight, like you said, time wise, it's a big crescendo moment in the movie, but it's shorter fights. But we're coming off of Revenge of the Sith, where we just sat down for a longer time. So I think I think the environment really just helps tell the story there.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite environments for a fight. It so matches where the characters are, what's going on with them. It's so evocative. I think all the locations are pretty great at, you can put on your sort of analysis hat and really say, like, well, what are the similarities to other media? Let's examine the feelings that it evokes. But they also work on a gut level. Without any analysis. So just I feel these feelings. I don't even need to analyze them or give name to them. I feel them, right?
Yeah.
That's in many ways the goal of storytelling. In this, I think, is one of the most effective at, you can feel it in your gut, and then you can move on to putting words to those feelings and those connections. And I think it's because it feels ancient, particularly for somebody who has grown up like you and I have, in a culture of this specific kind of folk tales. Maybe it lands different with other cultures. So I just want to be sure to speak from our culture rather than any monoculture. But for you and I, who grew up in a world dominated by these kinds of European folk tales, right? This is the Brothers Grimm in space. This is like, freeze the frame and see if you can find a gingerbread house in the background, right? I mean, and if you go to kind of like the nature of what folk tales and myths are, that they are the stories of different cultures, and different cultures across the world can have similarities, but the stories kind of shift as different cultures get different priorities and are trying to communicate something, right? And I feel like a lot of the folk tales that this scene is evoking, what do dark, snowy woods mean? Well, the woods are thick and mysterious. You don't know what's in there. The snow makes it even more like cold and isolating, and you can't be out there forever. And it really becomes, all of these stories are about what happens when children are lost and alone out in a place that they're maybe not quite ready for, and there are monsters out there. It's so stories of what happens when kids are taking their first step into the world and dark and bad things are around. How are the kids going to step up? That's what a lot of these dark, snowy wood folk tales are. And that's exactly what's happening to Finn and Rey. Of the adults are gone. There's literally a monster stalking you. How are you going to be able to face your fear and turn around and face it? So it's aesthetically cool as hell to me. It looks great, but it has such deep meaning that's fun to vocalize and talk about, but I also just feel it in my gut.
Yep. Just the way it looks, the way it feels, even him, the monster stomping after them. And again, I think he's also a little kid in that forest too, but especially for Rey and Finn. And it stands out, man. I just from the trailer to the movie to now, I just love this look.
Yeah, Yeah, and I think it works really well for Kylo. I love that you point out that in some from Finn and Rey's perspective, he's the monster, but
Yeah.
we know in his soul he's the lost, lonely kid who got lied to and sold a bill by Snoke slash Palpatine, and it literally just removed his father figure and is
Mm-hmm.
out there flailing around more on more than any of them.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that it's great that this place, much like I think Mustafar, just kind of blatantly reflects that's Anakin. They're fighting on Anakins Soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
This place is Kylo. It is caught between the light and the dark. Especially if
Mhm.
you want to dive into the fact that it was Ilum. It
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
Jedi stronghold for a place of peace and self-examination where you could connect with something more spiritual by facing your fears and connecting with the kyber crystal. Now it's been turned and twisted. This beautiful, peaceful place has been twisted into an awful weapon. And that's Kylo too, right? Caught between the light
Mm-hmm.
and the dark. And now in the midst of this battle between light and dark, it's literally falling apart.
Yeah.
Just like Kylo is emotionally.
Yeah. Well said. Love it. Yeah. The ilum of it all is, sometimes I wish that had been a little bit, more established and clear. And that's just kind of a lore thing there, but it still remains, right? It's still, and it only adds to it once you kind of factor it in a little bit later on. But yeah, it's all there. Into the woods, these kids go into the woods.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love the Ilum thing because if you're not a deep dive Star Wars person, if you're somebody like I just watch the movies and I want the movies to stand on their own, I think the story works incredibly well. And then if you have the Ilum level and you want to bring all that canon and storytelling in, it only supports what's already there and makes it richer to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Excellent. Well, we're going to take a quick break and we will be back to finish our discussion of the Rumble in the Dark Woods. Back in a moment. And we are back to continue Magic of Lightsaber Fights Part 6. We are talking Kylo versus Finn versus Rey versus feelings. We're going to talk about the filmmaking. Ken, when you watch this fight, what realities of filmmaking do you think about in terms of choreography, the time it was made, the choices, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, you talk about the time it was made. I go to this fight, this lightsaber fight, having this immense pressure on it, as we've kind of hinted at before and discussed. This was the first lightsaber fight in a long time. Clone Wars, we love Clone Wars, but I'm putting that on the shelf for a little bit. For the general public, this was the first kind of like on-screen live action fight. And this could have been the Luke moment, right? The saber moves. And I thought Luke in the theater, even Mark Hamill has said, I watched it. I thought that could have been me. And sometimes you just want to go, Mark, just sit in the corner. So the big reality to me is that this fight, it's about what this fight needed to do and what it set out to do. It's what the filmmakers wanted to do, not maybe what the fandom in general. I don't mean that as an insult, but just because, again, I'm sitting in the theater going, oh, I forgot Luke. Yeah, Luke might pop up here. Like, ooh, the lightsaber's moving. That's definitely going to Luke. Like, all that was there. And I've said before and written before that this we might not have been, that's a general, we might not have been ready for a new hero, but this fight was telling you, don't worry, you are ready for it. And it needed to set out to do that. And I think that makes it a real brave sequence to me. The fight stood up for what the film believed in. And that's kind of the reality around it.
Yeah. I think that's what I think about a lot is I think this fight is thrilling. It's got a lot of great, fun, cool moments. It looks visually, exciting on just the sort of thrill and adventure serial. And who's going to win? I think the stakes are high because Kylo's clearly powerful. He's clearly, not in a good place mentally.
Yeah.
And there is really like, how are those two going to get past him? So the stakes are high, and I feel like what makes this fight great in my mind is it's mostly just concerned with the story, right? It isn't concerned too much with some of those questions that we were talking about at the top of like that I was obsessed with of like, what is the official sequel trilogy lightsaber fighting style, right?
Yeah.
It's a good fight. It's not trying to be like you thought Revenge of the Sith was great, we're going to blow it away, right? It's just so focused on, yeah, we want it to be thrilling. Yeah, it's a Star Wars movie. We want to have a good lightsaber fight, but it's not obsessed with the fight. It is obsessed with the storytelling in the fight, And I think that's maybe what I think about is that this fight is so focused on being an important revelatory part of the story. It's not trying to get ranked number one as the coolest fight ever. It's about the characters.
Yeah, you just said some things that I just love in there, my friend. I really love what you're saying. You know, when I say this fight stood up for what the film believed in, it's kind of what you're talking about there. Because it had this, weird pressure, this very palpable pressure of being a fight that it was as big as some of the prequel fights. But we all, again, because you have jerks like me on early podcast days going, it needs to be more like the original trilogy, which to me means, I don't know, grounded and so-called real, whatever that means to me at the time and others. And it succeeds in a lot of that areas. And there's a lot of digital effects in this fight, and more than they sold us in 2015, right? They added some trees. Ava DuVernay with some great notes to JJ on how to change some things here. All that's there, and it looks beautiful. But you're so right. It wasn't like they knew they had some time. They knew other films were coming. They knew this was the launch of the era. And so it's big. It's its own fight, but it just does what it wants to do and what it needs to do for the saga versus what we all might have wanted. We can throw our Mecha Luke jokes out there and all that kind of stuff, but this is even before that, right? It's before Last Jedi. And it was like we need to do this. We need to give you a new hero. We need to answer bigger questions. And I love what you're saying. It didn't look in the past and go, great, we're going to get on a Screen Rant top 10 list with this fight. It did what it wanted and needed to do. I really love that.
Yeah. And at the same time, like I said at the top of the episode, I feel like it answered that question of what is the fighting style look like in this era. I was like, well, there isn't one unified style. It is character based, and I feel like this fight does such a great job of showing it. We're introduced to the idea that Finn would have kind of basic proficiency with staff weapons. We see him fighting the riot control baton guy, and it's a fine to me leap of sort of storytelling faith that he's familiar with those kind of weapons. He trained with those weapons. He's fighting with it like it's a baton, right? And he is just proficient.
Yeah,
he just keeps himself alive for a few minutes in this fight. He is not taking it to Kylo, so that's all flowing from Finn and his life experience. I think with Rey's fighting style, we get the very staff-like, which is well established in the film. The very staff-like Palpatine pokes, the battering rams, and the defensive strikes and just wild swings at trees and at Kylo to keep him farther away until she lets the Force in, right? Yeah. And then it's so great that we see like a peek of at what her style is going to be. And I feel like when she lets the Force in, it's not like, yes, the Force can, control your actions, but it also obeys your command. But it's also somewhere in between, right? And I feel like sometimes this idea of letting the Force in is just being like, open yourself to your own instincts. And I feel like that's her opening herself to her own instincts, right? Of feeling the difference of between the blade and the staff, of having watched what Kylo is doing with the blade and becoming much more flowing, right? There's not fear. Now there's precision and confidence in the way that she is spinning that blade around. So it's all character based for everybody, including Kylo, right? I was so happy to watch this again and just see like, what's Kylo's style with the lightsaber? Showboating. Like, there's so many little flips and flourishes. There's a cockiness to it, and there's almost like a I am going to beat you up while also showing you that I'm totally proficient in this exact kind of boxing style that I learned at Harvard. There, to me, there's a cockiness to it of like, look, you people don't even know the forms, and I'm switching from form to form to show you how much more I know than you do, right? There's just like, there is a sense of years of training and showboating and falling apart. Like every time he's kind of pressed, he does have some like wild feral swings, but then when he's kind of like, oh, I got to take this seriously, suddenly he has sort of like elegance and form, and he's spinning, and you can see the slash start from his foot and travel through his core and come out of his hand. Like, there's flowing energy of somebody who's clearly trained.
This is great. This is where I'm going, Joseph. I apologize in advance if this sounds like shade to anyone out there. It is not. This is a general cover. Kylo is a lore master who never misses a trivia question. Wins every Star Wars trivia bar crawl night. Rey is going, that's awesome, but what does it all mean? Kylo's like, it just means Form 9. Ching, ching, ching. She's like, hey, let it in. What does it do to you? How does this feel? How does this affect you? What is this about? Oh, love it.
Yeah, no, I love it. And yeah, and that in terms of what the filmmaking makes us think of, I continue to feel like Force Awakens was really well constructed to be seen the first time, and then to be seen for years, and to be seen by different generations. I think J.J. Abrams is a filmmaker in the Lucas and Spielberg school who's like, I want to do what I want to do, but part of what I want to do is always think about the audience and think about how they're going to react. And so I always feel like the image of the Skywalker blade dancing around in the snow was meant to be seen by people who had a deep affinity and connection to the original trilogy, either grew up with it, maybe they found it 2 years earlier in 2013, but they love it and they've seen it a million times. If you have an affinity to the original trilogy, you're seeing The Force Awakens for the first time, and you're wondering when Luke is going to pop up. I feel like that shot is constructed to make you feel like it might be Luke, to only heighten that it's not. Rey doesn't need another parental figure right now. She doesn't need a hero or a myth from the past. She needs herself, and to accept that she's strong. So I think if you have all of that Luke on Hoth baggage, I think it only heightens it. And then I think it's really well constructed, because I've seen other people on social media going, what are you talking about? Yeah, I never thought that,
Right.
And I think, to me, that comes from, if this is the first Star Wars film you saw and you have none of that baggage, none of that question of maybe it's Luke, it also works great because it's just telling the story. The Luke thing to me is it enriches it.
Yep. Yeah. And it's such from our perspective, right? And that's a lot of what this movie is saying is its own perspective. That's why I go to this idea of just this fight did what the story needed to do. I think you're so right. And I do understand that there was just a lot of the audience, and this then bleeds definitely more into Last Jedi. Totally get it. But a lot of the audience just wasn't ready. But the film said, don't worry, you don't need to be ready. This is for the people that need this, that need Rey, that need Finn, that need the new heroes, that need the new generation. That's part of this story too. We're going to deal with the old generation. We're going to deal with what the legends do to those who were the legends. We got that going on. But this moment is something bigger. Yeah. And it boils down, again, it boils down to Luke, the Hoth baggage. I love that you call it the Hoth baggage. I read an essay about that. So anyways, and I agree with it. I agree with what you're saying about JJ in this moment.
Yeah, and I'll just always remember my first viewing of Force Awakens and some of the emotional journeys of just like with Han and his death, being like just kind of into the story at that point, really starting to wonder when Luke was going to show up, and having gone into the film really feeling like, I'm looking forward to this film where Han Solo is going to die, and just completely during the film forgetting about it until he's like, Chewie, you go up there, I'll go down here. I'm like, oh no, all right. Yeah. There's like a huge like, oh yeah, that I'd known this and I'd forgotten this, right?
Yeah.
And then with this moment, it really was it shakes in the snow and is like, wow, this is Luke. And you know how your thoughts can go so much faster than reality? Like in those seconds I had like, oh, I can see him there in his cloak in the woods. That's great. How's Rey gonna act about that? How's she gonna feel? Like I had this in conversation with myself in my mind in those seconds. And then when it landed in Rey's hand, with the rest of the audience, I erupted in applause, and my mind was like, "Oh yeah, that's better."
Yeah, this could be its own episode, so I don't want to belabor it anymore. But I've made reference to some of those conversations. I recently I was at a birthday party for Emma Fyffe, the great Emma Fyffe, and a couple months ago now. But I was having conversations with some folks younger, and we're talking mid to late 20s, and they were just like, they were Star Wars fans, and they're like, yeah. Original trilogy doesn't hit for me as much as it does others. I've shown it to some of my friends, and I don't know, it doesn't stand up. And it's that kind of thought and those kind of folks. And that's a little bit older. That's mid to late 20s, and so maybe your late teens, early 20s when Force Awakens comes out. But think of even younger. You talk about baggage, but they don't have that connection like we do. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. So when you say that people are like, what are you talking about? I always thought it was Rey, or always should have been Rey. Yeah, because that's that perspective generation. They don't connect. That's my dad, older brothers, or in worst case scenario, grandpa's hero, you know? And this is ours. And it's just that simple.
Yeah. And for me, in that moment and now, and yeah, I agree with you. It could be a whole long episode, but I suspect people still have various strong feelings about this. I think this is for me why I really think about, there's a difference between what might be satisfying to me as an isolated moment. If completely detached from the rest of the Force Awakens, you told me there's going to be a moment where people are in danger and the Skywalker blade flies to Luke Skywalker's hand. And I'd be like, that's great, amazing, beautiful. But then you place a moment that you'd enjoy as a moment in the context of a story. And the reason I was immediately like, that's great, even though I'm a huge Luke Skywalker fan and wanted to have him enter in a triumphant moment. What's that story then? That this entire time that we've watched Rey and Finn try to turn around and face their fear and stand up for themselves and believe that they can do things themselves, to just be like, yeah, don't worry about it. You know, and that for me is why I continue to like what is actually there, and it's one of my favorite moments, you know, in Star Wars period.
Yeah, really is.
Well, let's talk. Excuse me. We kind of jumped ahead here a little bit. Let's get into some favorite moments of thrill and emotion. I suspect the lightsaber flying to Rey's hand might be one of them for us. But where do you go in your list of favorite moments and beats from the fight?
Yeah, if we were just Star Wars ranking this moment, that Hero's Blade moment would be in the Hall of Fame, right? Absolutely. I'll say before, I'll highlight it here. Don't need to go too deep in it. I love angry, hurt Kylo. I just love everything about it, because it's slightly bizarre, right? Especially when you first see it, he's punching himself and the blood, and Rey. It's a choice. Rey looks down. They show the close up of the blood, the good pickup shot. It's very clear. And then the bowcaster and all the things we set up with some of the comedy earlier with the bowcaster into the moment. Yeah, but it all means so much more. It's all there, and I just love it. You know what I mean? It's kind of an awkward moment. Like, what are you doing, buddy? But I just love it. It really sets the tone for what's coming.
I think it's just a great physicalization of what is happening to Kylo is, hey, I expected this horrific act to center me, to remove my trauma. Instead, I metaphorically ripped my own soul apart. And now, instead of a metaphor, Chewie ripped his gut apart.
Yeah.
Uncle Chewie with the bowcaster, right? And I think that he's trying to project to himself, to Rey and Finn, that he's powerful, that he's in control, and he's got this soul wound. And he's trying. I think that punch is just being like, you know what? I can handle any amount of pain. The dark side is pain and fear, and this doesn't hurt me. I'm not hurt. Boom, 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 boom. Right, and it feels like his intent from his perspective is to further terrorize them, right, and show how in control he is. Even a massive gut wound can't stop the great Kylo Ren. I'm fine. And what he's actually projecting to them is like, the hell are you doing, you weird monster, punching your own blood into the snow? You know, I think it is a great, to me, just physical story of what's going on in his soul, but also the disconnect between what he is trying to project and what is being received by the people he's trying to project to.
Yeah, and it's a great point, too, and it kind of Rey's response. I think that's one of the times she uses monster, which is one of her favorite words about Kylo and Ben, and I think it's a great word because it's really apt. Yeah, it's not exactly a one-for-one comparison, but it's not unlike a little bit of Keaton. You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. He's just kind of losing.
It really is. And there's that initial punch with the blood in the snow that's tracked down, but then there's the break in the fight with Finn, where he's clearly in pain, right? He's clearly hurting, you know. And there's a real he's been told to walk off an ankle injury, right? And he's like he's pounding it like doesn't hurt. It's okay.
Yeah, it is. This is an advertisement for taking care of yourself, listening to your body and your and mental health needs. This is definitely. I'm not even joking. This is a Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself, Ben.
Kylo Ren's PSA for self-care. That's a great one. Yeah, so that's a huge one. One of my favorite moments in the setup to the fight is the yell of traitor at Finn, right? I continue to enjoy that, but it's really fun to think about it back in 2015 when we had been having discussions about looking at the prequels differently, enjoying them much more, appreciating them more, and I'm sure that was bubbling up other places in the pop culture conversation. But in terms of like the kind of big picture understanding, the prequels had yet to have the renaissance that they're enjoying now. And a lot of the verbiage, even from the publicity, was like, look, we're doing things real, not CGI, kind of just whispering, don't worry, it's going to be more like the original trilogy, not like the prequels. So in that world, to find something in Force Awakens, I was like, that's total prequel stuff. To have Kylo yell in his grandfather's voice, that petulant, broken liar, traitor connection was just electrifying in the theater to me.
Yeah, it had an impact. It caused the little waves, even in me, and I'm in a much more, at that point, even was in a much more positive place for the prequels. But you're right that it kind of been the narrative. And remember, because there was a conversation around Celebration 2015. If they didn't do a lot with the prequels here. I was there. I don't know if that's 100% true, but also it's not a whole lie. Like the prequels weren't on full display in 2015 at Celebration. Again, the day-to-day, minute-by-minute details, I don't recall. But that just kind of was the narrative that emerged. And to have that moment, it was kind of, not so fast.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was one of those great moments where like, oh, this character Kylo is powerful because he represents all these different significant characters from the Skywalker saga. And it was great to see that, like, oh, wow, he is. There's some Anakin.
Yep.
Yeah. So what are some other favorite moments of thrill or emotion for you?
Finn picking up that blade, picking up for Rey, and even the little detail, it's buried in the snow, and he kind of grabs it and shakes off the snow a little bit. And look, yeah, absolutely. One day maybe we get to see or read, but I hope to see Finn pick up that blade again for himself, his own blade, and I'd love to see some of that. I totally agree with that there. But this was I love the little moment, and I love him standing up. And I know there's some understandable and I think correct kind of conversations around the marketing, how that was used, and Boyega's have been wonderfully vocal about that. I agree with that, all that stuff. But going to just the moment of the film, him picking up that blade and the determination on his face, especially he's been running for a lot of the film. I really love it. I think it's powerful. A lot of things with Finn are really, really powerful when you're looking for it, and I really love that one.
Yeah, me too. And talking about like the actual narrative of the fight and what's going on in it, right? Finn makes this brave choice, and the way he ignites that blade is that like, I don't care what's going to come out of this. This is the right thing to do, and I'm doing the right thing. This is the exact, choice I made when I didn't fire in those villagers for you. I'm standing up to you, and it's great. It's a great moment. But then in the way the actual fight is constructed is, Kylo, who's in emotional and physical duress, easily takes it to Finn, right? Just very, very quickly knocks him down. In the kind of the narrative of the fight is Kylo's playing with Finn, and it's great bravery of Finn to stand up to him. But kind of, I think, an answer to the people who are like, well, how could Finn stand up to Kylo? I'm like, well, he doesn't.
Yeah.
In a couple specific moments that I like in that narrative that show both Kylo's kind of not taking him seriously and Finn's bravery. I love that moment where in the first little phrase of their fight, Kylo knocks Finn down, and he turns around and he does the gut pound, and then Finn gets up quite quickly, and there's that great moment of Kylo like, oh, what? He's getting up. I should pay like his whole body language changes. He's like, oh yeah, I should. This isn't done.
Yeah.
I should. That toy I was playing with got back up. I had better pay attention.
Yeah, that's a great moment.
Yeah, and then also in that fight, I think the shoulder exchange between them, I really love. It's obviously it's painful to see Finn in pain, But the shoulder burn to Finn is great because, you use those cross guards is great to see them used offensively, and to see them, kind of a million jokes, social media jokes were answered that, yes, those are dangerous.
Yeah. I'm glad you put that in there. I put that in there as well with the note that it might be a little dark, but Kylo burning Finn's shoulder just was a little of that real raw thing that sometimes, some of us clamor for in Star Wars, whatever that means. I don't know, but it was there. It does. Yeah. The cross guard debate. Oh, if you don't remember, children, if there's gather around 2014, lightsaber was debated for a long time. So that, and it's just, it was just something kind of new too. And I like that. And sorry, buddy. Sorry, Finn, that it hurts, but I like it.
Yeah. And it combines, to me, it successfully raised the stakes because this is a terrifying place. This is a terrifying, Kylo's a terrifying person to face, and making the stakes real makes this fight really emotionally effective to me. I do also like that Finn does get the shot in on Kylo's shoulder, right? Because it shows that Kylo is off his game, not taking Finn seriously. And I really like the narrative of this. Like, well, Finn gets a shot in. That's great. That's good for Finn. And then once he gets that shot in, Kylo's like, okay, well, I'm done playing. You're done.
Yes.
It's so fast and definitive. And it really reads as like, oh, I have to take him seriously and stop him right now.
Yeah. And the brutality level raises.
Yep. Which again is hard to watch, but for me it works narratively, and like you said, a lot to talk about with Finn. There's so much that I love about Finn's journey, but that still leaves plenty of room for understanding critiques and wishing for some different things myself as well. But do celebrate Finn being the hero here. Where do you go once we get into the Rey and Kylo phrase of the fight? Where do you go for favorite moments?
I put this might be a cheat because it might be a lot of general stuff, but there's a lot of them, and this is post the Hero's Blade. We can talk about that as much as we want, obviously. But there's just kind of both of them running. I'll call it running and gunning through the environment. He's kind of chasing her in the kind of the little rock formation area. She's I love when she slices that tree that's kind of in front of him. And I can't remember if that's one of the digital trees they added. I can't remember that. It's been a while since I watched the BTS stuff there. Kylo just kind of swinging a heavy blade. Like his swings are just like he's just taking a baseball bat and trying to hit a home run. He's just like a lot of heavy swings. And then that includes Rey's Palpatine strike, which could be its own moment, of course. But it's just, I love that part of the fight. It just kind of switches gears a little bit there. And there's just a lot of little things I love.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked about it a lot, but I want to be sure to celebrate it, not in terms of what could have been, or all that debate about could the saber have gone to Luke? Could that have been the intention of making some people think that? I also want to be sure to just really celebrate the moment as it is in the film. That saber going to Rey, like I said, huge cheer moment. But I also love, like, there's a little bit of a challenge of, like, Finn just ignited the blade in a very similar shot, right? So how do you make it different? And to me, it's the emotion. Finn's got that, like, I'm doing this. I'm done running. I'm fighting back, right?
Yeah.
And we, the audience, have this elation, right? Of like, yeah, Kylo doesn't own and control everything. The blade was calling to Rey. It went to her. She is getting past her fear and accepting it. Kylo having to dodge out of the way because the saber's going so fast is great. So there's all these things about it that are so triumphant. And then the look on her face is like, I guess I have to ignite it then. Right? The build up to it in the ignition, which is sort of like frame wise is very similar to what we just saw with Finn, but it's entirely different because of the emotion and kind of going through all of those. Like, I'm still scared, but I know I have to do this. I can't say no to this. And then to have all of it build to a poking, screaming charge is really great. So that whole phrase and everything that happens in it, from the triumph to the uncertainty to the poking charge, is just, a great emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, and the blade flying. I love Kylo kind of being like, whoa, he thought he was going to get it in. But just, you're right. I think the way Daisy Ridley played it, I think is one of her finest moments in the three films. It's just that shock, but also, yes, but what am I going to do? All right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put the blade out. Like, it's there's a lot going on in that moment. And the music cue is really great. So it is what it is. Yeah. A great moment.
Absolutely great moment. And yeah, then I feel like, Rey kind of pokes at him, slashes at him, and then Kylo's just kind of chasing her, right? I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah.
and I do love lots of beats. I love when they're in the rocks and she kind of leaps away from him twice and he cuts at her twice.
Mhm.
Adam Driver has these two great grunts. Like, "Arr, arr." And then that log cut's kind of, it's hard to beat. It's very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then as they get toward the end of that first chunk of their fight, I've always really loved that sort of back and forth a lock at the chasm where Kylo pushes
Yeah.
forward, Rey pushes back. It's really making use of the cross guard to really catch the Skywalker blade and kind of hold it in that locked position. But even the way the camera follows them as there's the push forward, the push back, and then back again with Kylo is just like great kinetic energy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What are other moments in the sort of a wrap up of the fight for you?
Yeah, there's a great moment with Kylo's theme kind of taking over the vibe, right? It's kind of during the stuff you talk about here, this run and gun attempt, and Kylo's theme. I think it's kind of underrated. Whether it's just his full on theme or the First Order theme. I understand that the discussion maybe, but you hear it and you associate it with Kylo, and I just really love where Rey seems to be losing a little ground, and it kind of sets up for the big finish. So I love that. I love Rey kicking Kylo down. She got that great kick, which just makes me think of the scavenger on the streets of Jakku there. So you talk about her kind of really finding her style, finding who she is. It all factors in. So I love that there too.
Yeah, there's a ton of great stuff. I think for me the whole moment where she is reminded that she isn't alone, right? That she is connected to something larger, and to follow Maz's guidance in that moment and open herself up to the Force. Everything about that is great, but my favorite moment in that is we go into the slow-mo, which I love because that was inventive and different, and not being afraid to try something new in a lightsaber fight in a Star Wars movie. But coming out of it to Rey opening her eyes and just having that absolute certainty that she didn't have when she ignited the blade, right? That moment with the great classic, Force theme is when in my life the Force as an analogy has helped me. That's the feeling, right? And we've seen it in Luke before too, right? When he lifts 3PO in the Ewok village, right? His eyes open, and there's just that calm and that certainty.
Yeah,
the certainty in Rey's eyes in this scene has got a little bit more energy to it than calm. But it's the certainty. It's that sort of like taking a deep breath, checking in with yourself, pushing past the fear, and finding this resolve that you're like, I know who I am, and I know I can do this. Yeah. And when the Force as an analogy has helped me in life, that's what it feels like. And it's in that shot. And I just love it so much.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I love everything about it. And it's a very direct moment. And I remember having discussions even off air with pals back in 2015 that, I don't know, maybe sometimes when something's so direct, people have an issue with that. It's like Kylo's going the Force, and she goes, ooh, the Force. And then this happens. I just love it because it is that. Because it is that simple, because we all kind of forget it. We need those reminders. And you're right. The slow motion, it's a great sequence. And I think when you're editing a greatest hits of Star Wars years from now, or even now, you can put that in there. In fact, I remember even seeing like this kind of moment at the Hollywood Bowl, and Williams is playing her theme. It's all there. It's a big moment for her, and it's a big moment for many generations of Star Wars fans.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, maybe we should end on that triumphant moment, but I'm going to throw one more out there. I love the slow-mo Kylo stumble after Rey's shoulder poke.
Yes. Oh, yeah, no.
That whole phrase is of the fight, that last phrase is him being just sort of like shocked that this has her connection to the Force has truly awakened in this moment, right? And being just utterly shocked to be so off his game. But just great Adam Driver performance. There's something about kind of that slow motion kind of like flips the entire fight, where the beginning was like Kylo was this unstoppable force in the woods, and now Rey is, because she's just kind of continuing to advance on him. And it's almost like I wonder if the editors just looked at it and like, Adam Driver's stumble is so compelling we need to spend a little bit more time with that. Slow it down.
Slow it down. Love it. Love it. Mm.
Yeah, absolutely great. Any other moments you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Just a final one. Rey's kind of flurry and flare at the end when she cuts Kylo down, right? I know there's a couple beats to it, but the final one, that was an applaud moment for me and a lot of folks in the audience on a lot of my early screens of Force Awakens. And therefore, I just think it's effective. I think it's kind of cool, especially from where she starts the fight or where she starts this movie. But it's very much her. It is very much Rey on the streets of Jakku. It is very much where she is headed. And I just kind of love that little victory moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great cheering moment when I saw it in the theater. It was a great kind of finishing move that wasn't cutting a limb off, but instead scarring, which, is also something that was great to have a little bit of variety. But I did want to ask you, when you first saw the film, did you think, A, that she cut his hand off when she battered down? And did you have even a moment where like, well, that's it, he's done, he's dead?
No, I didn't. I think, I don't know. I'm not going to give myself credit. This isn't me smart in the moment. I just think it happened so fast that I didn't take it in those directions. Not even a limb. And then before the shot of his face, I just, kind of took it as it was. But again, that's me stumbling onto the right answer, not knowing it back then.
Yeah, I think I was so immersed in limb loss. Was like, did she just cut his hand off, or like just his thumb?
Yeah.
And obviously, if you watch the film closely, she batters the actual blade, which is why he doesn't have to repair that blade or anything like that, the hilt or anything. Yeah, great move, great move. Always been curious if you thought that you is that a limb removal?
Yeah.
All right, my final question here, Ken, is if the chasm had not opened up between Rey and Kylo, separating them in that moment, what do you think might have happened?
All right, so you sneak this question here at the end, and I'm sitting there this morning watching this fight a couple times, and I'm like, "Ooh, yeah, I'm gonna pull this string out here. I'm gonna see where this goes here." And I have a couple thoughts, but it ends up this. I'm gonna jump to my answer. The same thing. I think Kylo begs for his life by offering her power at a place. He kind of continues that train of BS. It's a little bit of a whimpering, begging for his life, but in this, like, no, you don't want to do that. Look, I can help you. You're pretty good, but hey, look at you. You're pretty good, but you're not going to get better unless you have me around. And I think Rey, by this time, maybe there's a little bit more of the energy of what he did to Han, a little bit more of that. Is she going to kill him? I don't know. I don't think she knows what to do with all that yet. The connection with Kylo is different here than what will be later on with them, of course. But I don't think she really, she's not going to stab him in the heart. But don't forget, I still think Chewbacca shows up, and I still think Rey goes to Finn, because that's the thing that was driving her, right? And I think she goes back. Defeating Kylo is not the victory condition here. It's saving Finn is one of the things. There's a little thematic stuff we talked about too. But so I think she might have this moment of right, but then wait, Finn and Chewie's still showing up. The world's still imploding, and I think we're in the same spot.
Yeah, no, I think in the big picture, I totally agree with you. I love the idea that Kylo would pivot toward trying to manipulate her more, because I think Kylo keeps fighting, right? He's shocked in physical trauma, but I think he is still, the kind of character in this moment who's going to stumble towards getting what he wants. So, I love the idea that he'd Rand had her maybe kind of try to get up and keep fighting, but I totally agree that Rey is like, okay, I stopped him. He's no longer a threat to me. I need to get Finn. I need to get out of here. So I think if the chasm hadn't opened up, I don't think it would have been glamorous. I think it works better the way it is in the film. But I think like Kylo would have ranted, maybe tried to get up, and I think Rey would have bonked him on the head with the hilt of the Skywalker blade and just knocked him out cartoon style.
I love that.
Floating stars and convoys around his head, and he conks out. Because I think that is.
Yeah, sorry. It's like she's Wyatt Earp and Tombstone, and just instead of she just takes the hilt of the gun and hits Billy Bob Thornton. What are you going to do? Just stand there and bleed?
Yeah, because I don't think she's anywhere near murdering him, right?
No.
I think that she has let this power in, and she is feeling her strength and her connection to the Force and determined to stop him. And I love that. Yeah, she looks pretty ferocious, right? But she's still Rey, and she's not gonna just lash out in total violence and anger. But I also like that you can see how this fight and doing this amount of damage to a person to just slash their face open would make her go to Luke and say, this has always been here, but it's awake now, and I'm a little scared of it, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I think that's a great point, especially where the story goes. Yeah, I have this power. Ooh, boy. Whoa, that was something.
Yeah, I unleashed it. I defeated him. I got out of there. That's good. But hey, when I fully embraced my power, the entire world opened up. Should I be concerned about that? Obviously not her fault, but as a visual metaphor, pretty great. All right, so out of 10 lightsabers fully ignited, how many lightsabers do you personally give this big duel in The Force Awakens?
I mean, this is a great fight. This is one of the best in a lot of ways. It has the only deductions come from maybe the length of the fight, which is not something I'm going to hold against it too much. So I'm going a solid 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I went as high as 9 out of 10, perhaps shocking, because I think as what's the coolest, most epic, fastest lightsaber fight? I think it is a little shorter. It is, I think, trying to create a really exciting scene that is built out of a wounded, stumbling, broken, expert lightsaber fighter and 2 young people who are finding themselves. I think it's appropriate that it's not, Obi-Wan and Anakin,
Yep.
But I acknowledge it's a little shorter. But I think there are still moments of invention and thrill, but I rate it so high because I love the setting. I love the aesthetic, and I love just how powerful the narrative is. And it's just satisfying to watch again and again on a storytelling level.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that.
Awesome. Well, in that case, that is our episode. Ken, where can people find us?
Oh, thank you for listening, everybody. We are the ForceCenter podcast feed. We are on Twitter at ForceCenterPod. We're on Instagram as well. Same name there. On YouTube, we are doing fun live Q&As monthly, other programming on the way, and we rebroadcast the episodes there if you'd like to listen to us in another format. Yes, on those rebroadcasts, you don't see our faces. You just hear our voices. So sorry. But hey, if you want, give us a sub over there and hit those notification bells and buttons and all those YouTube things you got to do there. Help us grow that channel. Facebook page is ForceCenter Podcast. We're available on Acast, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and a lot more. Just search. You'll find us. If you're on Apple Podcasts, you want to give us a rating and review, we'd really appreciate that. Spotify as well, I guess. Merch available at tpublic.com/user/ForceCenter. And you can support us directly at patreon.com/ForceCenter. From there, you get into our Discord and to discuss Star Wars with ForceCenter friends every day. You can follow me at Napzok or go to my website, catnapzok.com for more Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, House of Dragon, all that stuff is coming. Check out my show, Cast Really Talk, linking from that website. Joseph, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on all the social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok is at Joseph Scrimshaw, and you can check out my website for all my other comedy adventures, comedy albums, a book I wrote about 10 years ago now, my other podcast, Obsessed, and the live shows page has details about some shows, some performances I'm doing at the great convention in Minneapolis, Convergence, coming up here very, very soon. So I should wrap up this podcast and get back to working on those shows. All that information is on my website at josephscrimshaw.com. But for now, for myself, for Ken, for Kylo's wounds, both physical and emotional, this has been Force.
Oh!